I hope it's even the recording now, so thanks. Okay. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of Cabinet? To this meeting of Subject Overview and Scrutiny 3, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. The meeting agenda pack can also be viewed as the Council's website. Everyone participating in the meeting will be attending either in the Council chamber or from remote locations. Should I, as Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Colin Davis will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence, and in his absence, Councillor Graham Walter will step in as well, although he's actually having technical difficulties, so that'll be interesting. Members attending remotely must keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. However, all attendees should keep their microphones off until invited to speak. So I shall see your faces coming onto my screen shortly, I'm sure. Members and officers can indicate they want to speak by pressing the hands up icon. In the event of any vote, the Democratic Services Officer will call out the names of the members who will then cast their vote. I will now proceed to the agenda business. Delightful. Okay, apologies for absence. I have had Councillor Mike Kern. Lucy, have we had any else?
Thank you, Chair. So we've received apologies for absence from the Leader, Councillor John Spanswick, and the Corporate Director of Communities, Janine Nightingale.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I don't think we should have any more apologies for absence. I'm looking at the screen and it looks like we're pretty much a full house. Does anyone have any apologies for absence? Obviously, we've gone through those who might have to turn their cameras on and off and those who might have to leave early, so we don't need to repeat ourselves now. No, fabulous. Okie doke. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member or officer have any declarations of interest? Yep, just me. Okay. So I will be declaring a prejudicial interest on agenda items 4 and 5, which is the future waste service option, and conclusions and recommendations, as I was a member of the Cabinet when this was first looked at back in April. So I will be leaving the meeting at that time, and Lucy will then, as the scrutiny officer, will then facilitate a vote when we get to there. So does anyone else have any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing hands, so right, we'll carry on. So the approval of minutes. Please can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the 16th of July 2024? Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Happy to second, Chair.
And thank you, Councillor Bledsoe, for your second. Okie doke. Now we have that. We will go on to agenda item 4, which is the future waste service option. So I will make my leave, and Lucy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. If we can just give a moment for the Chair to leave the chamber.
Oh, might help if I took my lap.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So the Chair has declared a prejudicial interest in the item and has now left the meeting. So I will ask the committee for nominations to appoint a chair. I've been advised that any member of the committee can be nominated as chair for a one-off meeting. If there is more than one nomination, it will go to a vote and all members of the committee present will have a vote. Please can I therefore ask for nominations from the committee for a chair for today's meeting. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Lucy. Could I please nominate Councillor Martin Williams?
And could I have a seconder for that, please?
I second. Councillor Ian Williams.
Ian Williams, thank you. Councillor Graham Walter.
Could I nominate Councillor Colin Davis, please? Thank you.
And could I have a second for that, please?
Second, Lucy.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. As there is more than one nomination, I'll read out the names of all members present, and if you can please say who you'll be voting for. So Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you. And Councillor Nora Clark.
Councillor Martin Williams.
And Councillor Colin Davis, please. And Councillor Richard Collins.
Colin Davis, please.
And Councillor Philip Jenkins.
And Martin Williams, please.
And Councillor William Kendall.
Councillor Colin Davis, please.
And Councillor Jonathan Pratt, please.
I'll abstain. Thank you.
And Councillor Graham Walter.
Colin Davis, please.
Councillor Ian Williams.
Councillor Martin Williams, please.
And Councillor Martha Williams, please.
Myself, please.
Thank you. I therefore declare that Councillor Martin Williams is elected as the chair for this meeting of Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 3. Councillor Williams, if you'd like to come and take the chair. And we'll continue with item agenda number 4.
Thank you for those who selected me as chair, interim chair. We now move on to item 4 of the agenda, and that is the Future Waste Services Options report. And I'd like to invite officers to briefly introduce the report, and then afterwards I'll call upon members to ask questions, and ultimately we move on to recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of recording, it's Zach Shell, the Head of Operations for the Communities Director of Gen Council. Members will have seen in the pack of information on pages 9 to 13 a summary introduction to what is a more detailed paper that's been provided by consultancy Eunomia, which is found on pages 15 to 43 of the pack that members will have received. Myself and Jen Sparrow are just going to run through a PowerPoint presentation, which members will hopefully find useful because it gives a summary overview of that Eunomia report that is contained within the pack that members got. The report within the pack is quite detailed, and hopefully members will have had the chance to have read through that, but I think it might be useful if we just do a summary overview of it. So we've prepared a presentation to that end. Jen's already brought up the first page. If you click through. There we are. So this is just what we're going to cover off quite briefly. We won't spend too long on it. I'll cover off a summary of the previous work, because this isn't the first time we've been in this chamber discussing this subject with this group, so it's just a little bit of a reminder for members on discussions that we've had previously. And then I'll hand over to Jen from point 3 through to the end there to go through the sort of additional work that we've commissioned and the work that's been done to date for members. Flick through. Next one. There we are. Context of names. So, reminders for members. So, those that were present, well, if they cast their minds back to the 19th of March, will recall that we came with a report, and I think we actually attended that time, didn't they? With their report exploring 3 options for our waste services post the 1st of April 2026, when our current arrangements expire. They looked at 3 main options for us as an authority. The options of reprocuring the waste service, i.e. going back to having a contractor provide the service, as we have had for many years. Delivering the waste service in-house, pros and cons, financial and risk-based associated with that. And delivering the service via a local authority trading company. So that's a 100% owned company that the authority owns. We presented that report to this scrutiny group on the 19th of March and subsequently presented a very similar report to full Cabinet on the 16th of April. On the 19th of March, members here asked for a few things to be considered. One, there was a particular question around whether the commercial opportunity that would be presented by running a LATCO could potentially pay enhanced pension scheme contributions to the staff, either the equivalent of or similar to a local government pension scheme. There was a general expression that members of this group would like to see a little bit more depth and exploration of the LATCO option, exploring it further with some case studies, and also a desire to see some of the arrangements around in-house options being explored further. We went to Cabinet on the 16th of April, and Cabinet did make a decision in as much to rule out one of the options. So re-procurement was on the 16th of April ruled out, and Cabinet, very similarly to scrutiny, asked for some more information on the other options. So effectively what we then did was have another piece of work that we established with Eunomia undertaken to explore some of those questions that were raised and take things further. I'll just carry on with the recap just for members. So what we had been looking at is just mapped out there, how services delivered and some of the differences between those services. You'll see the second line there, the one in the sort of buff pinky beige colour, around staff and pension schemes. If members recall, that was quite a significant talking point at the last meeting. It's one of the biggest areas of cost difference, and it's going to be one of the biggest choice options between these two options that exist. One of the biggest choice factors is that local government pension scheme contribution. You'll see with re-procurement, which is now ruled out, and LATCO, the staff that would be employed by that arm's length company wouldn't typically receive a local government pension scheme, whereas if we bring the service in-house, that will apply. And as you members may have seen in the report, there's about £660,000 per annum cost differential as a result of that one single factor. It's the biggest single factor that we'll talk about today, whilst there are many pros and cons to the two options that remain. I'll flick ahead. I think most of that slide's self-explanatory. We also talked at the previous meeting about risks of these options. Again, this is part of the previous piece of work. There was recognised capacity challenges around bringing the service in-house, and the LATCO options, re-procurement, was a higher score, therefore lower risk as a result of that. Likewise, financial risks, there was less risk around the re-procured option, but the others had higher risks around them in-house, especially due to that local government pension scheme issue that we've talked about. However, there were advantages to some of the other options as well, such as in-house, with control and ability to change being one of the highest scoring for the in-house option. We can do far more flexibly with the service if we bring it in-house, and even a LATCO, whilst not offering the full range of flexibility that comes with an in-house service, still gave more flexibility and control than an outsourced contract. So there are a range of different risk factors, the bigger the score being the better the position. And in totality, re-procurement came out on top on that particular cost exercise, that particular risk exercise, and was one of the reasons why officers recommended re-procurement. If you move on to the next slide, Jen. We then looked at costs last time, and in there, due to the reasons that we've stated, the obvious pension issues in the main, the in-house option came out most expensive year on year. Re-procurement and LATCO were very similar, with LATCO actually being the cheapest year on year by a small margin over re-procurement. And then there was another slide that we just popped in here as a reminder to members. This included the ongoing costs, but also the second line there being the important one, which was the mobilisation costs. you know, and what will it cost us to set up any of these options. None of them are cheap, quite frankly. You know, even reprocuring, which is blacked out there, so that's not what we're going with, you know, was over £500,000, and then bringing the service in-house, effectively £750,000, and to all intents and purposes, setting up a LATCO, about £1 million of estimated cost that the consultancy that looked at this summarised we would need. So moving on, I'll hand over to Jen at this point. That pretty much takes us up, hopefully, as a useful recap for members on what we discussed last time, the options that were presented, and where we got to with the ultimate cabinet decision. We've now got a little bit more information around the setting up of the LATCOs, around the setting up of the in-house option, and some of the implications thereof for members to consider. And we hope, as officers, to take a cabinet report next month to present, as well as Eunomia's findings, hopefully the recommendations of Scrutiny in regard to the way forward for cabinet's full consideration, so we can narrow down those two options to one. The one thing I would add is, and this isn't a separate option, the timelines for myself as the operational delivery person are getting tight on this now. We've taken quite a long time to make the decision. We started in April. I hope to have a decision straight away. More information was needed. We tried to come back around due time, and then there were elections and other things going on. And for one reason or another, it's taken us quite a while to get here, and the timeline's getting quite pinched at the moment. And one thing we could also do, that I'd mentioned to members, not as an alternative to these two options, we still need to make the decision around the way forward, but we do have the potential to extend our current contract. It is written into there. We could give a blocks of 1 year up to 2 years, isn't it, extension to the current provider, which could give us a little bit more time just to implement whichever choice is chosen. But that's not a reason to not choose one of these two. I still need to know which way we're going, because otherwise, if we just chose to extend and didn't make a choice on this, well, that wouldn't be a gain at all, because I wouldn't have any more time. So we do need to help Cabinet make that decision, I would say. And without any more, I'll hand over to Jen to go through the extra material that's been presented now.
Thank you. Jen Sparrow, Clean Streets and Waste Contract Manager. So we're now looking at some of the additional info that we'd been asked for on the LATCO. So we've got an overview here, and there's more detail in the report. But they can operate in a more culturally distinct way, maybe more commercially driven and structured, and can offer workers membership of a lower cost pension scheme, as opposed to LGPS, which they would obviously have if they were employed by the local authority. The LATCO can voluntarily increase the employer's pension contribution rate. So whilst they wouldn't necessarily join, or they wouldn't join on an LGPS scheme, they can have a higher contribution rate than maybe private sector. Over recent years, LATCOs have become a more popular vehicle for providing local authority services, and is a legal entity which is wholly owned and ultimately controlled by the local authority. We've also looked at in-house. So with in-house, we have potentially increased levels of flexibility, more control. We wouldn't need to negotiate with a contractor if we wanted to implement changes, but potentially we would with unions, and there is the LGPS for the staff. We did have some figures off, so of all authorities in England and Wales, 185 are running services in-house. There are 317 in England and 22 in Wales, so I think it's about 50% are in-house. It was around 40% then were LATCOs, were contracted, and around 10% were LATCOs. They have as well, so we have looked at a review of some existing LATCOs. There's more detail again on this in the report. Where so CWM is a more local one. That's in Carmarthenshire. That was so they do the waste treatment, the waste transfer station, and the HWRCs. That was changed to a LATCO in 2018, and they changed it to a LATCO because they thought they could have greater control over the service. Some other examples here are born out of poorly performing contracts. So where the local authority weren't satisfied with the contract, they decided to set up a LATCO. Some examples of these are Cheshire West and Bristol. And there is a little bit more detail on this as we go further into the report. So the key learnings and experiences from other LATCOs was something that we did ask Eunomia to look at. So the risk, so it needs to be a high corporate priority if we were to go down this route, and a high degree of ownership for the council. There is also the risk of bringing the service in-house, so they would, with a similar level of risk there going from a contractor to either option. Some of the key risks are around IT and having different terms and conditions for staff. And the perception of risk would vary depending on the current arrangement. So we have had some issues with the current contractor at the start of the contract, but it runs really well. Our miscollections are really low. It is a really good performing contract. So you'd want to consider that, continue that, whatever option we did decide to go for. Value. So it's difficult to judge when moving from an outsourced contract to a LATCO. So Redbridge Civic Services in London, they went over budget from the second year of operating the service because their contract didn't account for annual indexation. Greening Ely, which is also another London borough, was working with an underfunded baseline. So when it was operated by a contractor called Amy, so what the costs went up when that became a LATCO. And the budget exceeded, and also there was an increase to pension and pay for the workers. Transition and mobilisation. So due to the nature of the LATCO being wholly owned by the council, we would be the company would be accountable to members. So it's vital in the first few months there's a success from a delivery perspective, so members can have confidence in the LATCO and buy in. We have advised that we would need to get external support to set up the LATCO initially. NSEC, which is an existing LATCO, had a successful mobilisation and start services supported by external help. They gained trust from members and the council. The mobilisation was quite smooth in that change, so that worked really well. Then scope of services. So since NCEC's creation, they have subsequently expanded. So they now include the operation of the waste transfer station and delivery of some of the council's highways functions. Ubico and Lambton 360 both followed a similar process where they brought services into the LATCO in stages, and we have recommended that if we did go down the LATCO route, we would start with waste services and then learn from that, see how that goes, and then if we wanted to add on more at a later date, to do it that way rather than trying to mix loads of different services in. People, so ultimately the success of the LATCO would be down to staff, who they are, how they are recruited, especially for the managing director and operations director and the financial director positions. So we would want somebody obviously in those posts who's got experience of running these types of big operations. And a solid mobilisation team is really important because it's a lot of work to move from a contractor to first of all setting up the LATCO, and then it's a cultural change for BCBC as well. So this is just a touch on some of the financial results that we have provided. So you can see here, so CWM, they between 2015 and 2019, they did run at a financial loss. They did have an issue with a fire, which obviously is unexpected, and that did contribute to that loss. Although for the current financial year, they are reporting a 10-month profit of 48,000 and forecasting a 12-month profit of 360. Liverpool have got what looks like quite a significant loss there, but despite that, the directors are satisfied that the company has adequate resources, having received confirmation of support to its parent entity. Liverpool Council have approved these financial statements to enable a continued trading for the foreseeable future, and they are happy with the service that's being delivered there. Then moving on to the governance and setting up the LATCO, because this was again information that was requested. So I took some advice on this, and because I think where members had asked for more information here was around the commercial aspect of the service. So they've advised that it's an 80-20 rule. Commercial waste is a grey area, but we could arguably the bulk of the work that the LATCO would produce would need to be on the waste collection service, the HWRCs. 20% of that could be commercial, but they have said we would need to take more legal advice on that. Then the governance structure. So you would have the company management team, which would be the day-to-day operations, the company board, and then the shareholder board and committee. The company board should be responsible for the commercial decisions of the LATCO, whilst the shareholder committee represents the political aspirations of the council, with the company management team providing daily management of the LATCO. Governance structure and democratic process. So recruitment at company board level. So any recruitment should be skills-based. Typically the MD would be the key role that you would recruit. Then other key positions would be the operations director, and you would have generally company board approval for those. The MD would usually come in first and then would lead the rest of the recruitment for any other positions necessary. Lambton 360 and RCS put in place an interim MD to get things moving whilst they carried out permanent recruitment, as the process took approximately 6 months. Company board, so you know me, I have recommended that this is they would not be members at this level to avoid any conflict of interest, and then the company management team would be day-to-day sort of reporting on any issues and that sort of thing. Then, so the interaction with BCBC and the democratic process. So you know me, I have recommended having a reporting mechanism in place between the LATCO Shareholder Committee and Bridgend Scrutiny and Cabinet bodies. It is likely these entities will want to be informed of the direction of travel and of any issues with the operation and management of the LATCO. So the government guidance advisor, the local authority company will be run by its board of directors. Their answer to shareholders says that a board of between 3 and 8 is likely to be practical. The company directors are answerable to the company, and the council should be represented on the board. The government guidance suggests that officers of the council are better placed to fill this role than members, not least because of significant issues around conflicts of interest. However, members are not prevented from acting as directors. The council may appoint members to the board if they consider it is the best interests of the joint venture company and the council. So in summary, council members are not prevented from being on the company board. However, you know me, have advised against for the following reasons. Company needs to be separated from the political influence to ensure consistency and continuance of the board, uninterrupted by electoral cycles, conflicts of interest at the local authority level. Best practice is to depoliticise the company and allow members to scrutinise in the way they would any other council department. This avoids whose conflicts of interest. And then this slide shows, we go into sort of the potential structures now. So this is the current structure that we have. So we've got the head of operations, Zach, and then myself. And then we have the waste contractor reporting into us. A LATCO would be a similar structure, because instead of having the contractor, you'd have the LATCO, so that nothing else really changes in how they would report in. And then this is a suggestion of what the management structure within the LATCO would look like. So the orange boxes here are the current staff that are employed on the contract. The blue would be additional roles that you normally have advised would be part-time roles, so you wouldn't need full-time positions for the blue. And then the pink are additional full-time roles that would be needed. And then this slide here, I'm not sure how well the colours are coming up, but this shows what we would need to run the service as a LATCO. So you normally have recommended keeping the current IT system. So Plan B uses a system called Echo, which has all the rounds on, or all the residents who are on who request a bulky, anything that they deliver is on the Echo system. They've advised that if we were to set up the LATCO, that we continue to use our system and purchase our system. Generally beneficial for the LATCO to purchase services from the shareholding authority, but BCBC doesn't have huge resources in teams such as legal, HR, payroll, or finance, so the LATCO would need to cover those costs. So the dark blue here is what the LATCO would need to purchase directly. The light blue could potentially be services already within the authority that they could purchase. Yellow would be recruited within the LATCO, and then possible council services here. Vehicle maintenance is the only one that they've got in there, so that's potentially, but this just shows the amount of services needed to run the service. Something else that Scrutiny asked us to look at was combining multiple services within the LATCO. So this can reduce overheads without a significant, so you can add more services without significantly increasing overheads. The services that potentially were looked at to combine were things like corporate landlord to help with recruitment issues. This could be done but wouldn't generate significant efficiencies. And typically, as we've gone over earlier, the LATCO would start with one service and then look to transfer potentially similar services in, but not all in, all in one go. The challenges of this could be that we've got different staff coming in with different terms and conditions, and how that would work and the disparities that could create. We have looked at potential services that we could bring over to a LATCO. So increasing the commercial service customer base was one. The issue that we have is we have a contract for our residual waste, and that is still in place until 2030, and it is a high disposal cost. So that wouldn't deliver the impact of more income just by increasing the number of commercial customers that we took on. HGV driver training is another one that could be looked at. Events waste management training is, waste management is something we could look at. Private MOTs, which the authority does already offer. We could potentially look at more commercial waste processing, but the issue is the transfer station at Tondi is quite small, so we're limited there, and potentially more income from material sales. And then mobilisation timeline. So the initial recruitment would be the Managing Director, Finance Director and Operational Director to help set up the LATCO and recruit the staff in. We have recommended appointing a Management Director and Finance Director at least 6 months before the start of the new services, and the Operations Director at least 3 months before, and a Senior Project Manager and a Project Administrator to plan and manage the transition from start to finish. We're looking at about 18 months. You're looking at this timeline is what we have left. Additional HR and legal support for the onboarding of the workforce. They'd also recommend hiring a HR manager and HR advisor for 12 months before the start of the new service, and procuring external legal support. Health and safety support to develop relevant management processes ahead of the start of the new service would also be needed at least 6 months before the start of the new service. And they've just put on this timeline just to show, so our preferred Cabinet decision at the end of October, and then budget decisions coming in February. And then moving on to in-house. So again, this is the current structure that we have. This is a suggested structure from Eunomia. Again, so with the current Clean Streets and Waste Contract Manager evolving to a group manager, waste contract manager, appearing in the structure so that would be the current Plan B business manager. So here we've got again the dark colours are current BCBC staff, orange are the staff that would come over from Plan B, pink is an additional role that's full time, and then blue are the additional part-time roles. Again, this slide shows the services that the council would need. So orange here is may need to be purchased. So we've got a lot of IT systems in here this time, quality, legal support. Blue, potentially incorporated from existing council services. And then the sort of yellow colour is potentially would be provided through the additional roles that were on the previous slide. And then compliance and legal responsibilities. So This is what we would need as an authority to be able to run the service in-house. So every waste management and recycling facility must have an accredited professional working on site for at least 20% of the time. So that's the certificate, the COTC certification, the top line there. We would have staff coming over, obviously on Troop, you would have that from Plan B, but you know, we would, if they left, we would need to ensure that we had someone else who could provide that. The environmental permit, so it's a long process to change the permits over, so that's just something we need to be mindful of. The O licence is around vehicle collections. There was a local authority recently that's O licence lapsed and they had to cease waste collections until they had a new licence in place. So it just demonstrates how big, you know, this is something that we would have to have. Insurance, BCBC would potentially need to upgrade current insurances. Health and safety, the council would become legally responsible for the health and safety of staff. We would need to ensure risk assessments and safe working practices are in place. And commercial services, an in-house organisation can't make money officially from a service such as commercial waste, but any profit could be reinvested back into the service. And then mobilisation times here are similar. So we've obviously, the contract with Plan B ends in March 26. So we've still got similar dates in here as for the LATCO. So we would also need, in addition to the permanent resources mapped earlier on, a senior project manager, project administrator to plan and manage the transition from start to finish. Again, we've got around those 18 months now. These could be temporary roles or an allocation of existing Bridgend resources depending on team's ability, and additional HR and legal support for the onboarding of the workforce. We've also recommended hiring a HR manager and HR advisor prior to the start of a new service, and again, any legal support necessary, and additional finance and health and safety support to ensure everything is in place. And that's it for the presentation.
Thank you, Paul, for a really comprehensive presentation. We have lots of presentations in here over the years, and that was particularly comprehensive. I've got some hands up amongst the committee, but I'll like to bring in Councillor Paul Davis first, who's a cabinet member for environment and climate change, or the other way around. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, Zach stole a little bit of my thunder, Chair. I was going to go back to the scrutiny meeting which I chaired back in March. What I will do, I reviewed both sets of tapes for that meeting and the cabinet meeting, subsequent cabinet meeting. I took some notes of what was said to get a grip of how they've come to the decision that they have, basically, because I wasn't in that meeting, obviously. Just quickly on the meeting back in March, I've just got the recommendation in front of me, Chair, which we sent to Cabinet. There's a lot of discussion in that meeting regarding the pensions. To be honest, was and several members in this room made comments, that we were uncomfortable with the pension arrangements in some of these setups. But it says here they discussed the ability to create funds within the LATCO on whether an offer of an affordable package of waste collection for businesses could be provide the potential to offer the same pension scheme in terms and conditions as Bridgend County Borough Council staff by offsetting the cost with potential additional revenue streams. I think that's been almost dismissed in this presentation, I think I'm right in saying. The second bit I read out is there was also an opportunity to control, shape and develop that service on the basis the committee recommended bringing the waste collection. On the basis the committee recommended that bringing the waste collection in-house should be explored in further details. I think that means the LATCO version of coming in-house there, I believe. So I'll jump now to the cabinet meeting on the 16th of April, Chair. Just from some quick sort of flavour of what was discussed in that meeting, and I just got literally bullet points of what various people said. Councillor John Spanswick, who's now the leader, was the cabinet member for climate change and environment at the time. He was in that meeting. He said, the refuse and recycling touches everybody in the community, which is very important. That's how important the service it is. There's not many that do that. He had concerns over the modelling and the best estimates in the short term and looking at the long term, and these figures are only valid at this moment in time. There's been some debate back and forth on that. The high level of risk procurement, only 5 companies in the UK who can offer this service, and the last twice that we've done it, we ended up with 1 company standing, which is a risk, with the same risk we stood if we'd re-procured. Well, that's been ruled out now. There was concerns over the changes to the Welsh Government and with the guidance for the collection going forward and the recycling targets, etc. And we need to be flexible, able to react to that. And that was another reason they didn't like the re-procurement, because obviously once you're in a contract, it's difficult to change that contract. Yeah? You have to pay extra costs, etc., etc. Obviously, they mentioned that the MREC stifles the profitability of a LATCO, unfortunately, so that the chances of making enough money to cover any potential extra pension costs could be made more difficult by that. He said we already own the depots and machinery. We're talking about staff here, and he may also said that we're only one of 2 other authorities in Wales that have contracted out. All the rest still do it in the current base budgets of the council, basically. So he moved an amendment in that meeting then to dismiss the re-procurement and to proceed with bringing it in-house, but to have more information on LATCO, which is, and it also asks for comparisons between LATCO and in-house, full in-house, which is what we've had today, isn't it? So that's where we are today. Councillor Gebby also made similar, reasonings. If that prefer the cost, TUPE and staff would be transferred over on existing terms and conditions for the first year or 2, so that would be fixed. Residents, and Councillor Gebby made a statement that residents across Bridgend, we have to acknowledge, are exemplar, is the word she used, in their recycling, which gives us one of the best recycling rates currently in Wales. And it's not us doing that; it's the residents there which are doing that by the service we give them, isn't it? So we've got to bear that in mind. We don't want to threaten that. So on that, Chair, I won't labour the point. We know where we are now. We're now discussing those 2 options, and I'll leave it at that and let me go open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you.
What I propose to do, I've got a couple of hands up already, is that we didn't have a detailed pre-meet discussion about this. What I propose to do is that we go through the appendix report, because that's where the meat of this is, through 1 through 6. And so if you can target your questions in line with those. I do recognise that there will be crossover, particularly with regard to pensions and perhaps other things. And if we deal with them, then perhaps we won't need to come back to them later. I notice the cover report is very much that, but maybe we can come back to that at the end just to make sure that there's nothing that we've missed along the way. So I think the first hand I have up is Councillor Philip Jenkins, please. Councillor Jenkins?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I apologise firstly, and I thank the cabinet member there for enlightening us slightly on the old basis of the report and the cabinet's decision, etc. But given that 1/3 of the options alluded to in the report by our consultant has been ruled out, I'm very, very concerned on that, because without further, investigation into a procurement system, we are at a loss to find out how it would actually pan out. I'm also very concerned that why no soft testing of the market has been done, or EMEs as they are called, but there are priorities and unprioritised and carried out. This had significant benefits for the council, and particularly the councillors themselves, in making a decision which now is a 2-horse race, apparently. And I'd like to ask the Cabinet member as well, were they there? What were the driving priorities in this restructuring as such? Is it a service structure, or was it accountability, or is it a finance in the context of making savings? As only one of these should be a priority. So that's one or two of the first questions that I'd like to put. But if they could be answered, I'm basically still at a loss of why a third of an option for procuring, which could be sustainable and could prove in the long term more viable and a better value to our taxpayers. I understand that some of the report alluded to various things as well, and the presentation by the officers. But I understand also that our disposal contract, etc., is tied in for another 5.5 years. So the potential to move on disposals and various other things is limited to us for another 5.5 years roughly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Well, firstly, Councillor Jenkins, if you was in the meeting, I believe back in March when we discussed this, when I was still chair of this committee. If you remember, if you go back and look at that tape and tell me how many times re-procurement is mentioned, because towards the second half of that meeting, it's barely mentioned at all. And the recommendation we give to Cabinet doesn't mention it. So they've taken that on board for a start, you know, when they made their deliberations. I'm not sure about your second question about because I wasn't in that Cabinet meeting. I'm only reading out, paraphrasing what was said, you know. But again, the tape is there. I can't really tell you what their reasoning was. And what was the other question you asked me? The second half of the question, sorry.
Well, basically, what drove this? What were the priorities or the driving forces behind the change? You know, it had to be you had to prioritise. Was it purely financial, based in that context? You know, was it sustainability? I think my question was there.
Point of order.
And accountability, or was it accountability?
This discussion is not following the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins, a point of order has been called. So Councillor Davis, could you?
Thank you. The recommendation is recommended the committee consider the contents of the report provided by Eunomia on the two options for delivering the waste services post 2026. The re-procurement option, as has already been stated, is done and dusted. We're looking at two options. Thank you.
Chair. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Bledsoe, is this a point of order?
No, this is a committee meeting. We don't have points of orders in committee meetings.
Thank you both. That's noted. Thank you. I'll move on, Councillor Jenkins, unless Councillor Davis wants to come back in on that point.
No, in all fairness to the Cabinet member, he was not in situ as a Cabinet member as well. I can't expect him to know everything, so I'll let you move on, Chair, on that at the moment.
That's appreciated. Councillor Bledsoe, are we working in order of the report, or are we?
I hope so, and I do apologise. I'd like to start by just expressing a little bit of, it's not dissatisfaction, it's not that strong, a little bit of disappointment that we don't have the author of the report here to make certain questions to. I think I would have appreciated the opportunity to get some clarification, and I will unfortunately have to direct those questions to yourselves, Zach. I don't know if you're able to answer them, but it is a disappointment that we don't have the author here. I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they weren't available. We did ask, but they weren't available. So we will do our very best to fill in any gaps.
And if it needs to be, we'll go to them and find out. That's fine. But it would. I feel, Chair, it would have been good to have them here, but it couldn't happen. On another point of procedure, we've had apologies from the leader, and it would have been good to have some, to get some political steer on that. Can I ask if it would be normal, if the leader isn't available, to invite the deputy leader to deputise? I don't know if that's the done thing or not. I mean, I'm very happy to point any questions to Councillors Williams and Davis, but I don't know if the Deputy Leader could have attended in the Leader's absence.
Councillor Bledsoe, I think the invitees are the appropriate invitees, but your comments are noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then I'll get on with my questions then, Chair.
Please do.
Like Councillor Davis, I watched the meetings that he's referred to, and I also watched the full council meeting of the other day where a decision was made to via money for the purchase of a decision that the Cabinet made. And the only reason I make reference to that is because that was bringing service in-house, which is what's referenced in this report. Could I ask what the view of the Cabinet is, because this will be a political decision made exclusively by the Cabinet, not by full council, on the fact that if we bring this in-house, we will be increasing the size of the council. And I'm trying to look at the overview here, the principle of bringing it in-house, and we will get down into the details shortly. What's the view of bringing more staff in, 2Ping staff in, making the council bigger, when we're consistently being told by senior managers here that we need to reduce the size of the council and make us smaller?
I've got a view from both, please.
In terms of the size of the council, I'm not quite sure what I mean, because I accept that the head count is likely to rise, but in terms of the overall turnover, the £500 million turnover of the authority, there'll be very little difference between the in-house option and the re-procurement option. So I don't really see that is an issue that we need to concern ourselves about.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bledsoe. Well, someone who worked in a local authority for many, many years, you won't go into too much detail. I always prefer the in-house option. You are correct, that there is a financial cost. There is, if other people were sitting here today, I won't mention any names, they would argue about them costs, but yeah, it's always a difficult one. But as Howell says, we're still paying for this service, aren't we? Even if it's externalised or if it's brought in-house. You are talking about fully in-house, I take it now, rather than the LATCO, because LATCO is very similar to what we've already, so we're talking about fully, paid up members, LPGS, etc., etc. There's also a moral argument. I look at the chair there because he actually made a statement back in March. We've all got this concern, the moral concern of some workers are on this LPGS and others that are not. And that we all wrestle with that, don't we? And this really boils down. This whole report does boil down to that. It's 300,000, I think it is a difference, and that is predicated on people's pensions, which we all said that in the previous meeting. So it's a difficult one to wrestle with.
Thank you. No further questions, I don't think. Councillor Bledsoe. So Councillor Ian Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, listen to what Councillor Davis has just said regarding bringing things in-house and his preference. I'm just wondering if we're going to be led that way throughout this meeting with Cabinet members. I have genuine fears that if we bring this contract in-house, apart from being subject to pension, sickness benefits, we're going to be at the mercy of the unions with regard to pay increases, who have been successful in getting 22% for junior doctors, 50% for ASLEF. This council can't sustain that. I'm also concerned, having been a member of this council for 2.5 years, and knowing the issues that we have within the Communities Directorate with recruitment and staff churn. We can't fill current posts, and we're looking to fill a complete new company if we do the LATCO, and to bring it in-house. Well, how are we going to cope? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So the question there is twofold. One is about the direction that this committee will take, but that's for the members of this committee to determine. so not the invitees. So it's in your hands.
Yeah.
The question then is, how can we recruit? How are we confident that we would fill those roles?
Firstly, Chair, I'd just like to say there's no predetermination here. As you can, you asked, as my personal opinion, as someone who's worked in authority for 36 years, that doesn't mean that influences the decision that I make. It's just, if I had my way, that's, in everything, but I don't. So it'll be a cabinet decision, and all the facts and everything else will be taken into account. What was the other question? Sorry.
Regarding recruitment. Really.
Recruitment, yeah. We had a similar question in full council on Tuesday, didn't we? From Councillor Harrison, I believe. And the statement he made then is, what I would say is, my son works for the Patoba Council currently as a seasonal grass cutter, and they have interviews every year. There's so many apply for those jobs every year that they have to take some interviews to sort of narrow them down. I'm not sure that the jobs that we can't fill from what my understanding is more sort of high level jobs, engineers and that type of work, where they're certificated and they are outside of this authority, they can get a lot more money. That isn't sort of the case with refuse loaders, I don't think. The pay is roughly the same wherever you go. So it depends where they live. It depends. I don't envisage a problem. Or Plan B would have that problem today, wouldn't they? Which they don't appear to have. So that might be my answer to that, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. Sorry, Zach. No, please do. I didn't see your hand. Sorry.
Yeah, happy to add on that point, Chair. I think obviously a lot of the question around the decision-making process are political in nature and not for myself, but I think I can provide some additional information around the recruitment and the difference between the two remaining options of in-house and an arm's length company. Firstly, for either organisation, CUPE will apply, so the staff that are currently in place with the existing organisation Plan B currently would transfer to the local authority or to the LATCO company under their current terms and conditions. That's obligation under law that would happen, and so we would inherit those staff in either event. In terms of going forward, recruitment is probably one area where LATCO has an advantage, in that if there is a recruitment challenge, a LATCO can look more flexibly at its terms and conditions of employment. They could, if needs be, if they found a particular position, etc., was being difficult to fill, they could more easily review the terms, whereas the local authority is stuck with the current terms. One of the points, I think, within the report somewhere, it talks about other options for LATCOs, and we talked about the corporate landlord model and the advantages that go into a LATCO could bring, and solving recruitment issues was, because of that flexibility, was one of the advantages that is listed in the report. However, I'd agree, I think generally on the loader side of things, I don't think there's a huge issue with recruitment. LGV drivers, I think, at one point you couldn't turn on the telly without hearing about the national shortages in LGV drivers. And at that time, the then contract provider, Kia, made some not insignificant changes to the terms and conditions of employment for LGV drivers to make their employment more attractive. And that was to our advantage. It gave us service continuity at a time when we may have had a shortfall in LGV drivers. So that work has been done. So we'll benefit from that work when the staff CUPE across with the terms and conditions of employment. However, should we need to do something like that again, then there is no avoiding the fact that once we're within the local authority umbrella, it'll be more difficult to be as flexible with terms and conditions changes. It would be longer union negotiations.
Thank you, Zach. I'm going to bring Councillor Clark in, and then what I'm going to do then, these have been a bit general, these questions, so that we'll perhaps go back to item 4, item 5, item 6 to just try and focus the discussion. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thanks, Chair. At 4.5 of the report, it mentions that a mix of operational and commercial experience can make finding suitable candidates difficult. And I think that was sort of nationwide, if I can remember when I read it. And also on page 28, when we're talking about the LATCO, I must admit I've got grave concerns about going down that route personally. Down the LATCO route, it says that the shareholders can drive political decisions, and that they can, you know, obviously come across with pay rises and the pensions scheme employer contributions, which obviously they will put over to the council, and you know the contract would obviously, or the cost would rise. So you know. Those are two concerns that I've got, but overall, I have got huge concerns about going down this company route. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Is there a question to anyone in particular, or?
And I think because Zach mentioned that recruiting basically wasn't going to be difficult, and I know he was talking about HGV drivers, but I'm talking about the managerial side of it. And then having the you know the cross experience of operational and commercial, because the report does refer to that.
Thank you. So Zach, then please.
Yeah, acknowledge. I think in particular that was in regard to the MD role specifically that I think those comments were made, if I'm correct. And yes, so they highlight that actually quite often a number of LATCOs have had interim MDs whilst they go through a recruitment process that can be quite long-winded as a result of it being a fairly unusual set of skills effectively that they're looking for from that person. So that's acknowledged in the report, yes, for that particular role.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Jenkins back in, we're broadly on section 4 of this and the review of existing LATCOs. I've got a question about somewhere in the report, and I've got too many screens and bits of paper in front of me to remember exactly where. But you looked at a sort of profit and loss assessment of existing LATCOs, and some were profitable, which actually could be problematic in itself, but some are profitable, some are loss-making. And what's driving that? Is there a common theme? Is the loss because they're inherently unstable commercial vehicles? Is it because of one-offs, or is it because it suits, frankly, for them to operate at a loss? Is there, has anyone got beneath those numbers?
Yeah, I'll let Jen chip in on this, because I think for one or two there were specific reasons given, like, someone had had a fire, etc. I think for me, and Mia did a very good piece of work for us on this. They presented everything that they could find, including that information. I find, to be honest, the financial information on the LATCOs, I'll be perfectly blunt, most meaningless information. The reason why is it just tells you whether it's suffering from a profit or loss compared to its income budget, which is provided by the parent organisation, i.e. the local authority. So that's as much a judgment as to whether they got the budget right in the first place when the local authority was setting their income budget as it is as to whether they were operating efficiently. So for all we know, we could have a loss-making company that's operating really, really efficiently, but they misjudged the income that it would need from the local authority in the first place, and it would show as a loss. And vice versa, you could have one that's shown as very profitable, but maybe they would just the other way around. And I
guess, sorry to cut in, but I guess you could have one that's profitable that is then losing some of that profit in corporation tax.
Yes.
Which isn't being invested in the service.
Potentially, yes. So it's difficult to know, unless you're inside those companies, it's difficult to know whether that's a judgment of good service performance or not. I think in particular, the Liverpool example, I think it was, Jen, was quoted as being one where it's loss-making significantly when you look at that profit and loss balance sheet. But yet on all sides within the LATCO organisation and on the client side, everyone's really happy with the performance of the organisation, which tells me, well, maybe they just haven't set the budget in the right place, because they're quite accepting of it. So.
Thank you, Zach. Looking at my list. So yes, Councillor Jenkins, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks. Well, first one I would like to ask is a question, and somebody, if they could enlighten me properly on it, is would all new employees' pension contributions from the local authority be included in revenue costs? Because as alluded to there can be a significant difference with the local government pension scheme and a private pension scheme, ranging from approximately 20%, I believe, with the local authority, and 4 to 5% with, a private company, etc. So overall, to maintain pensions, would it be included in the revenue cost, and this being costed out as such? Now, my other question, again, as the report alluded to, expansion on being able to possibly create better business, etc., was based upon commercial waste. And as we know that at the moment, I think Bridgend County Borough is struggling against a commercial waste competitive background, where I know a number of my local clubs and pubs and around there have turned to a private contractor as opposed to our previous contractor, our Plan B. Initially, I think it may well have been because of the bad service and the interim break-in point that they had, where we had problems for the first few months. But the costings have been reduced, and it's a competitive market. So, I really I've got concerns all around that as well, particularly, and I'm looking to, or I'm considering the fact that, if we brought this in-house, as basically the report actually said, if you read between the lines, we're looking to run what should be based upon a commercial enterprise. And I mean this in the most respectful manner now at the moment. I do not believe, given the amount of I'm going to say consultants we have used over the last 2 years I've been here, that we have that kind of expertise in a commercial basis market. And any recruitment, which has been alluded to, though, will need the expertise of persons with a mixture of both the commercial background and probably a little bit of local government, etc. But if it's a standalone in-house system, it should be based upon that and looked upon as purely being a business and run specifically as a business by those with the expertise to have it. And I'm afraid that's my major fear with the in-house one at the moment. And how can I say, the words I'm looking for? Would you bear with me a minute when I get some of my notes that I made?
Can I summarise what I think?
Well, yes, go on then, please.
What I think you've asked there is 3 questions. One is relating to pension contributions and how they'd be treated within the LATCO as revenue. Yeah, how they would. Yeah, that's why I said how they'd be treated as revenues. That was the one question, and then the second one I think became 2 questions, unless I misheard, which was could we expect to compete with established players in the market? And in order to do that, particularly if we were in-house, how would we satisfy ourselves that we had staff with the requisite commercial acumen to be up for that competition? Would that be a fair assessment, Councillor Jenkins?
Yes, and yeah, that would be. Yeah, you put it better than myself, actually, at the end of the day. But my major concern, just summarising on this, would be, is this a risk that we should be taking or be at the time? Because
can we get an answer for the 3?
Yeah, sorry, my fault.
No, it's quite all right. I just want to lose the focus. Thank you. So I think to Zach for those, I think the technical questions.
Yeah. So with regard to the pension costs, obviously, if the service comes all the way in-house, then all costs become revenue costs, other than purchase of equipment, which is capital. And so pension costs would be revenue costs, absolutely. if the service was part of a LATCO, then the pension costs are part of the overall costs of the running of the LATCO and would form part of the annual or monthly, however it was funded, funding stream that is given to the LATCO to effectively procure the services for that arm's length company. The pension costs, and I'll just reiterate, because it is it's the $1 million crux decision, really, is the pension cost. There's lots of pros and cons to these two routes, LATCO or in-house, but the pension costs are the biggie. I've mentioned it before. Obviously, when the employees become local government employees, they receive local government pension, and there's that significant £666,000 a year cost to that. That doesn't happen with the LATCO model. There's all sorts of debate around that, the moral argument around paying that pension, and that's for yourselves as politicians to debate. Fortunately, not one for me. But in no uncertain terms, that is the big question in this debate and the biggest difference between these two options. Going on to the commercial waste elements of what you raised, would we be able to complete? I think what the Eunomia report really highlights quite gently, but it is in there, is effectively we wouldn't compete in that marketplace. We've got high disposal costs, and as has been mentioned here, we are tied in for a period of time. That high disposal cost means that competing in a commercially competitive waste sector, which is a very commercially competitive waste sector in South Wales, would be difficult. So whilst there are opportunities to do bits and pieces of work around the edges that might lend to the profitability of a LATCO organisation, various things were mentioned. You could do events waste management. There was, if we're servicing our own trucks, we can do MOTs, etc., etc. There were a few opportunities, but I think the Eunomia report effectively summarised by saying you shouldn't really count on the profit from commercial activities given any particular substance to propping up the organisation in the first 1 to 2 years. Doesn't mean you shouldn't explore them, and if you set up the LATCO, definitely should explore any commercial opportunities that we can. But it isn't going to be the be all and end all. It isn't the thing that's going to make this the option to go for. And yes, expertise would be needed to drive forward that commercial element, but I think we'd have to temper bringing in staff to drive something forward with being realistic about whether we're going to make substantial money from it. I wouldn't invest thousands and thousands of pounds in a team of sales reps if I didn't think they could actually sell a product at a commercially competitive price. But yes, you would need expertise.
Sorry, thank you.
No,
I think that was it. Was it? That was the third question.
The broad question right at the end is the risk worth taking, and that's not one for me. That's one for
Councillor Jenkins. You did seem like you were about to ask another question, but if you don't mind, could I go to Councillor Pratt and Councillor Clark?
No, certainly, yeah. Certainly.
Thank you. I'm mindful it's 5:15 now. If we aim for about 5:30 for maybe a short break, but we'll see where we get to. Councillor Pratt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one point of a question over quickly is who would be the shareholders? Because reading the report, my assumption at least would be that the council itself would be in effect the sole shareholder. So I'm not sure we get any criticism from outside bodies. My view on my encouragement towards the LATCO, and I understand what Zach is saying. This isn't going to be like £1 million a day making scheme overnight. And we've got other contracts, but the opportunity is there, and I think that's important. If we bring it in house, the opportunity isn't there. The opportunity is there if we choose to use it or it is viable, whereas if we bring it in-house, it just wouldn't be. I just thought, would I be correct in those statements, or have I misunderstood where I'm coming from? Thank you, Chair.
Zach, I think again.
Yeah, 100% owned by the local authority. So the local authority would be the shareholder.
Thank you. Is that satisfy you, Councillor Pratt? Your hands down. So Councillor Clark, then please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions at this point. It mentions in the report that if the LATCO requires additional funding, then the council would be required to provide that funding. So if the LATCO, say, made a loss, what would happen? Whatever the amount of loss was. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was about the IT system. The report mentions that if we went for a LATCO, that the key risk would be implementing that IT system. Going back to the implementation of, was it 2017 or 2012 when we changed the waste contract, and that sort of went, how can I say, well, it went quite badly, quite honestly. So if I could ask those two questions about the council having to front up with funding if there was an additional funding needed, and whether what would happen if there was a loss, and also about the IT system. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Zach, I think most of these are towards you.
Yeah. So absolutely, because the company would be 100% owned by the authority, effectively any loss that company has would be, to all intents and purposes, it would be the same as an overspend in an in-house service area. It would be a direct hit on the bottom line of the authority. The point about the software, there's a number of software systems that would be needed to provide the service, the customer management side of things through Echo and routing software, all vitally important for whoever provides the service. And I'd say those comments are pretty much true, whether that comes in-house or whether that is a LATCO. Either organisation needs to make that investment in all of the appropriate software to be able to run this service, and it's vitally important on either side of that equation that's right.
Thank you, Zach. Who's on the list? Councillor Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am trying to follow your lead on what pages we're on. If we could look at page 19 of the Eunomia report, specifically around the material sales and waste disposal. And I know we're not discussing reprocurement, but I just want to use it as the example here. All three are the same figure. Would we not be able to get more revenue in from the waste if we brought it in-house or had the LATCO? Are we able to negotiate better terms? We're living in a different world to where we were when we signed the last deal. People are now looking for food waste to generate energy, plastics, and all that kind of thing. Should those figures be the same, or is there more reward for having it in-house or LATCO?
Yeah, the Eunomia's view is obviously all options have the same opportunity to strike good deals with the marketplace in terms of recycling. This is a consultant's report, so I'll give my views as well. I've worked in that sector a long time. I can see where they're coming from. The same opportunity exists for both organisations, for us as a local authority and for a LATCO company. They can both strike good deals to get good returns on recycling streams, etc. In my experience, what really tends to happen is a LATCO company could probably be a bit more fluid and responsive to the fluctuating recycling market. It's a volatile market, it goes up and down, it's a global market, and a private company can typically be just a little bit more responsive to striking a quicker deal. We move slowly as local authorities, which means by the time you get round to setting up a return rate deal on a particular material stream, you're probably going to want to stick to that deal for quite some time because we're not resourced to keep changing the deal. So you tend to do longer term deals on a decent price as to maybe bouncing around the market trying to get the very best price. But I get where they're coming from. If it was me, I'd say maybe a LATCO could maybe get a little bit more because of that ability to be a bit more flexible. But that's probably a personal view, not necessarily a reflection on the report.
Thank you, Zach. And did you?
Yeah, no, just to say thank you. And that's kind of where I was coming from the outset with the report writer being here, being able to challenge them on that. That's one that I had circled. I take your professional experience with great, you come to the table with a lot of experience in that industry, and it's very interesting to hear that. So without putting potentially, there could be more opportunities with a LATCO, but nothing that would really set the world on fire, I'm assuming.
I'd probably say the one thing to counter what I've just said is the local authority, we can probably tap into local authority framework deals that have been set up because of high volumes across a number of local authorities that might give us a better deal than some of the LATCO ones. So it's kind of pros and cons on both sides, which is maybe why they're right saying overall, it's hard to say who'd come out on top.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Williams, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have concerns on pay scales. Who would decide the pay scales for a LATCO? Will it be tied into local authority rates and subsequently open to pay increases negotiated by unions such as Unison, which could potentially put this authority at financial risk if the increases were too big?
Is that's your question?
That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
There's a little more to come, but that's fine.
No.
Zach again.
Yeah. So again, TUPE would apply to either organisation. So the staff transferring across to either the local authority or LATCO, TUPE would apply, which protects initially the employees. They would remain on their existing pay deals, which evolved over time. This contract's been outsourced for a long time. I think it went out initially in 2003. So, things are very different over there in terms of pay terms compared to local authority terms now. The LATCO would inherit the pay terms that they've got, and it would then be for the LATCO to carry on as the board of directors sees fit with regard to pay deals. Obviously, any cost implications would have to go up to the senior board and be signed off, and that's where local authority input would be given, i.e. if they were trying to sign off something that would cost more than the local authority can afford as the ultimate owner, there'd be a degree of control. But there wouldn't be any reason why a LATCO would veer towards local authority terms and conditions of pay because it is a private entity. The staff, what would be more tricky, I think, is the staff coming across into local authority, into the local authority arena with an in-source contract will be protected. They will be on their terms and conditions of employment, but those won't all match their counterparts within the local authority. And I think over time, there would probably be a desire to try and harmonise those pay terms where we can. I suspect, again, this is me second guessing where we'd go in future, but we'd probably want to try and, where possible, harmonise to remove some of the differences between those members of staff. But initially, day one, as we inherit it, then TUPE applies and everyone would be protected.
Thank you, Zach. Councillor Davis, I see your hand come up and go down. Every time I look down, it goes down again. Did you want to come in, or are you content?
Thank you, Chair. Just on a few anti-union comments which I've heard from Councillor Williams. I resent them and I disagree with them. I won't say any more on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. So there's no question there.
I'm trying to follow your lead. Thanks.
Thank you. Much appreciated. I've got a few questions on the LATCO. Assuming no one else has any questions on the LATCO, I've waited my turn, so I've got a few I've been picking up along the way. First of all, there's an assumption in this report that it is a wholly owned special purpose company. Is that through legislation, or is there an opportunity, should this council wish, either at the outset or some point down the line, to partner or seek a joint venture partner to, frankly, either share the risk or to attract private sector investment? Is that an option down the line, or is that prohibited by local government legislation?
I'd have to confirm to be 100% sure, but given that we do have partnership working arrangements where we part-own companies, the Red Star Engineering Consultancy being one, where we part-own the company with other authorities, then I would imagine it is a possibility. It could be explored. I'd be worried about exploring more options because I'll run out of time, frankly, to implement anything. But I can't see that it couldn't be explored. I'm not sure what advantage it would bring us unless we were in a capital short position or something of that nature. Because frankly, I think I suspect any company coming in as a partner would probably want to have a controlling interest. That's how come back to the Red Star arrangement, that's how that worked with 51%, so that they ran the organisation. And for me, once you get into a private company run the organisation, you're almost into, well, why not just reprocure, the option that was ruled out. But technically, could it be done? Yes, I believe it could.
Thanks. I mean, I've got no preference. I mean, just prodding and asking questions to see what comes out of the tree, really. But I guess where my head was that at some point down the line, if you've created a successful commercial enterprise, that may have value, and a future administration may seek to capitalise on that value. But I was just checking that there was nothing to preclude that.
And I would have to double check, because we are talking about those 2015 regulations, and I'm not an expert in them. It might be for this particular purpose that wouldn't be possible, but I know in other areas we do have partially owned companies that provide services for the authority.
Apologies, I've got two. Oh, sorry.
Very quickly add to that. I think we will still be legally obliged to honour the MREC contract and whatever. Even if we are the partner, the issue we got really is that sort of that wonderful contract we've got with MREC that's not in our favour.
Thanks, and again, it's not a preference in any way, shape or form. It was just trying to explore the parameters in which we work. Forgive me, I have two more questions, but I have to wait my turn. With the IT system, I've spent a lot of my career working in repair and maintenance contracts, which particularly in this day and age, are heavily dependent on IT systems. Is there a danger if we buy, if we were not unable to buy the ecosystem, or if we have the ecosystem there doing waste and it's tied in the LATCO, and we're operating our in-sourced resources through a different system? Is there a danger we sort of stratify that? Would we be better, or diverge? Would we not be? Are there advantages to doing everything in one place with one IT system, which we can then make our own and become the council standard, I guess I'm asking?
So Plan B used the ecosystem. The Kia before them used the ecosystem. So it was a much smoother handover for when the new contractor came in. There was still a lot of work to do with handing over that system from one company to another, but it was a lot smoother than having to put every single round on a different system and map all that out. So I think they've suggested to use the ecosystem just to try and minimise the disruption to service, whichever way we decide to go.
Again, which is sensible in the short to medium term, but in the longer term, the water industry, for example, they use a Salesforce type system for metering, for repair and maintenance, for leak. But in the longer term, if you've got services in different pots, is that a disadvantage where we could seek to have a more comprehensive system, maybe 5-10 years down the line? It's just a consideration. And my third question was staff structure. There seems to be an assumption in the report that if with the LATCO, for example, that the existing Plan B staff would tube into the LATCO, and don't get too nervous, that the BCBC staff would stay where they are. Is everything up for grabs? I mean, in theory, everyone could move into the LATCO from both directions, leaving a very light management touch in BCBC.
You could. The only thing I would say is a lot of the staff in the service areas connected to this are also connected to other BC services, and in particular the street cleansing service. One of the things the report talks about is the ability to take other services into the LATCO. And the street cleansing service is one of the, we talked about the corporate landlord service, and that was really because of a sort of imperative to try and ease recruitment issues by having more flexibility around terms and conditions. But then the report from UNOMIA mentions that your more closely related services actually might be a better fit as a LATCO. So if you were to set up a LATCO, then down the line, and they don't recommend doing it on day one, what they say is you might want to, a year or two down the line, be thinking about taking the street cleansing service into the LATCO. Well, at that point, if you're taking the street cleansing operation and the waste operation into one area, then you do start to talk about all of the management structures and supervisions that comes within that, because they all sit in pretty much the same area. So potentially then there's a whole chunk of the BCBC managerial structure in Jen's area that potentially could sit in the LATCO. I think if it was purely to provide the collections and CRCs, then it would just be as described. But if you were to put more services, linked services into it, then potentially more people automatically would sort of go across with that.
Thank you, Zach. There's two hands up. I don't know what people's thoughts are on time. We've been going 90 minutes. I was going to take, there's three hands up. If I take these three questions, then I propose a short break, and then when we come back, we can just touch upon the in-house option and then thank our guests and move on to recommendations. So if everyone's okay, I'll take the three hands that are up now, then we'll have a short recess, and then come back and finish off the questioning and then move on. Thank you. So who is first? It is Councillor Walter, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not a question. With your indulgence, I'd just like to share some reflections of my experience of having worked or run for 9 years the equivalent of a LATCO, having also spent quite a bit of time in a commercial organisation and in the early part of my career in the civil service. The equivalent to a LATCO that I worked for was set up and partially funded by Welsh Government. And my experience of working in that environment versus, shall we say, in a government organisation is that they can be far more flexible in terms of the way they set about going about doing things, particularly when there are challenges. And they can be more responsive and act more quickly because they don't have so many formalised processes to go through. If you've got the right people at the head of that organisation, they will be more accountable and accept that accountability and be willing to be more transparent around the accountability. They're generally more commercially minded, which means that they have a mindset that's more expansive and ideally suited to taking additional services on, always looking for the next opportunity, if you like. When I mentioned responsive, I always used to like to use the term clock speed. The speed at which they operate can be significantly different to those in managerial positions in a local authority or indeed a government department, and that's no disrespect to colleagues here in this meeting. And it's only natural that members here and others would be nervous about looking at this because it is an unknown, let's be fair. It's an unknown entity, but I don't think that in itself is a reason to preclude it. So I'm conscious that you're aware of time. I'm not asking a question, I'm just sharing those observations. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you, Councillor Walter, and I think you highlight the importance of scrutiny and this committee. We're not just here to vote against each other and have a bun fight. We do have real life experiences as you've just demonstrated. Thank you, Councillor Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Chair. My two final questions on LATCO. I'm looking at the graph on, sorry, the chart. So it's not even a chart. The list of figures on page 20. Jen, you pointed out where we would have to appoint people, and specifically maybe the head of a LATCO quite early on in the process in order to put the structure in place. Where are the costs of employing those senior managers to set up the LATCO laid out? Because I assumed that they would be in the near £1 million, but I can't see what line they would be associated to. And after that, Chair, if possible, without wishing to look that we can run before we can walk, if a LATCO was set up that was solely owned by this authority, I'm trying to pull a few things together here from different conversations, and the fact that when we looked to re-procure, that it was mentioned that there were only 5 real providers out there, and we were kind of last person standing when we got to the appointment. If a neighbouring authority put out to tender their waste collection service, when we've set things up and we're happy with how it's running, could we then tender to provide the services in that authority? And then could we look at a way that this would become a revenue generation opportunity?
I'd like to come in on that.
Yeah. First of all, on the financial bit, the figures that have been presented here are a summary. They don't go into a huge breakdown that's underneath. In truth, this report is to bring the extra information that was asked for. The financial bit, more in depth, was done last time, back in April, May, March, April. Sorry. So that was when the finances were really looked into in a bit more depth. And what we've done is just recapture on the headlines. But yes, effectively, all of those costs of those senior management positions, etc., are built into the overall cost differences. So the LATCO has some additional costs that the in-house service doesn't have. Those senior management positions being one of that. That's why when I talk about the pension scheme being that £600,000 of extra cost, it's not like the difference between the two options is £600,000. It's 350 because there are other high cost elements to the LATCO, and those are included. But the breakdown that sits behind it isn't here. And to be honest, we were just doing a recap coming back to those figures. Sorry, the second point got wrapped up in the first one. I forgot.
It's fine. So, again, not wishing to run before we can walk, but let's say that we go with the LATCO option, we set it up, we're happy with how it's servicing our borough.
Yeah.
Could we then tender for other ones due to the lack of competition out there in that? Because I know you've touched on the strong competition in the commercial sector, but we have spoken about the lack of opportunity through re-procurement because people willing to tender for the contract. So is that something we could then tender for?
I would say no because of the 20% rule. So yes, we can do other commercial work for commercial gain for that company, but it has to do fundamentally the work for the local authority as to 80% of its work. So if you actually went for a whole collection service for another authority, well, that would be as big as the work that it does for Bridgend. So it's the 80-20% rule that would limit that. So.
Okay, disappointing, but fully understand, because for me that would be one of the strengths of the LATCO, is to look to underpin its operations by generating revenue in. But thank you, Zach.
I just want to bring Councillor Paul Davis in a second.
Zach, what if this authority asked to join the LATCO? Would that be something that could be done? Because I'm sure that some of these LATCOs had covered more than one authority. Do you understand? As part of the 80%, then
I suppose if the other authority was to become joint owners of the LATCO in the way Red Star, then that would be a different. Then that would be different because they'd be working then for their owners, so to speak. But in terms of the LATCO being able to operate services outside of its owner, it's limited to 20% by turnover.
Thanks, no problem. Right, there's more hands come up now. So,
Chair, I just wanted to check where we were at, that's all, thanks.
Where we're at, we are just finishing off the LATCO questions. I'm happy to take Councillor Jenkins because his hand was already up. Councillor Pratt has pushed his luck. If it's a short question, I'll take it, and then we'll have that break after Councillor Pratt. Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is obviously addressed to the officers, Zach, particularly again, I'm alluding to the report where it just says the paragraph or the disposal within BCBC in the waste market is tied into 2030. I wonder, could he explain how advantageous or detrimental this would be in either the LATCO or in-house, or how does it prohibit us? What are the drawbacks then, basically?
Yeah, so that's a reference to our disposal arrangements linked to Neath Talbot Council that we were tied into for a very long time. We are actually getting towards the latter end of that contractual arrangement now, but that runs until 2030. I can't remember which month it is. Yeah, it's not a particularly cheap disposal arrangement for us, but it is nevertheless one that we are tied to. We have over the years tried to negotiate and have successfully actually reduced the price considerably from a number of years ago through negotiations with our partners there. I mean, largely, it has a fairly equal effect in either direction, really, in terms of, it means that any commercial offering of waste services, because bear in mind, the local authority can still offer commercial waste services as well. It's not only a LATCO that can do that. But in either environment, we have the disadvantage of having one of our base costs being quite high, which is the disposal arrangement, and that's just a fact until such point as we get past that 2030 date, and it affects both options.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for that. It's £198 a tonne, I believe, which is quite costly, isn't it? Thank you for that answer anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Councillor Pratt and then Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chairs. I've been Googling away, which is always a dangerous thing in these scenarios. But I was looking at what I thought was an opinion piece, which rapidly becomes an advert for a company, as these things are, but asking whether waste services are in crisis across the country, and LATCOs are definitely the way forward, and and you should definitely use our consultancy company to help you set up. But I think this is it's posed an interesting question, and I think it may help Councillor Bledsow's view on startup. That I won't give the name of the company, but it appears to be a LATCO from another county council, and they're using their 20% to go, we've done this, we'll help you set up your LATCO. Is that viable? Do we know how successful that is without giving the specific county council away or the company? But is that an option that this local authority has considered, if it was to choose a LATCO, to bring in a third body to assist with the creation of a LATCO? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, we would need help to set up a LATCO. We would be going to someone. As to who that is at this point in time, I have absolutely no idea. That we could approach the general marketplace, consultants that could assist. If there are other, I wasn't aware, but if there are other local authorities that are saying we've done this so we can help you through the process, then potentially we could also talk to our current contractor. We're aware that they have set up LATCOs for other local authorities in other parts of England. So that there's lots of partners that we could talk to in terms of soft market testing. Ultimately, we'd have to go for a procurement process, come up with a specification for what assistance we need, and that procurement process would lead us to the ultimate group that would assist us. But who they are, I have no idea at this point in time.
Thank you, Zach. And Councillor Davis, and then we'll have a short break. Well, you could bookend this, then we could just come back and
So, Zach, you've kind of answered my question, because the question, so I like Councillor Blatt, so disappointed you know me are not here. They should be. We paid them, I don't know much, to do this. They should be here to answer some of those detailed questions. So, like Councillor Blatt, so I'm disappointed in that, and I would have directed my question at them, but as you were here. So, in addition to the report, have you done any research into this issue in terms of LATCO?
I mean, we've had general conversations with other people, but they're sort of informal discussions, if you like. We've had some informal discussions with Plan B because they set up and operate these arrangements elsewhere. But in terms of formal, paid for professional advice, this is it. You know, I have views myself. I've worked for one of the LATCOs in the list of examples. You know, for me, you know, there are lots of pros and cons, and you know, they're contained within the report. But I always come back to the one biggie, you know, which is around the moral issue versus the cost around the pension scheme. Because to be honest, that dwarfs everything else. All of the other considerations are this big, and that one's that big, you know, in terms of the decision-making process, I think.
Can I come back with a comment then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. So moving on to 512, governance, structure and responsibilities. For me, this is probably the most disappointing part of this report. Yeah, and it touches on something that Zach said just now. So apart from the fact that the proposed structure is cumbersome and unnecessary, you know, 2 boards above an operational board, I really do not get that. They've laid out the pros and cons. They've used terms like if, buts and maybes. And to me, the report smacks of a desktop exercise. You often get this when you talk into UK-wide consultancies. They look at examples they're aware of, and all the examples given them, and I know they're all related to waste, but they're all English-based. You know, there are no Welsh examples, which I'm disappointed at, and which is why I asked Zach the question, really. Because the fact is, there is a neighbouring authority which borders Bridgend, the Vale of Gwan Council, had a very successful LATCO for the last 4 years. When they set it up 4 years ago, one of our senior officers helped them, assisted them in setting up the LATCO. Yeah, it runs school catering. It's called the Big Fresh Company. It's very successful, but to look at this report, and to me, Chair, you're looking at the foundation of anything is around governance, and it's the foundation of this report. And they talk about at one point on 5.1.3, the democratic process. They say in one of the paragraphs, not having elected members in the company board to avoid any conflict of interest. Now, you can go on the Companies House website and you can look at the Big Fresh listed directors, where you'll find at least 2 or 3 head teachers. Bear in mind now, this is for school catering. So at least 2 or 3 head teachers. You'll find a councillor, I think maybe the cabinet member, and you'll find an officer, a senior officer, who may have been promoted beyond where he was to one of the directors, if not an assistant director. So it's nonsense for this report to claim various things when the answer is literally a 5-minute Google search away. And so I'm really, really disappointed in the quality of this report on that basis. It is a good report in terms of a blueprint for the council to adopt one way or the other in terms of a process plan. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at the governance structure, it's a nonsense, quite frankly, in terms of, as I say, a cumbersome and unnecessary structure. It also makes a number of claims, which, as I've said, is completely discounted by the evidence in another neighbouring local authority where the LATCO is going quite well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Is there any comment on that?
Yeah, I'm not here to defend Eunomia. I'm conscious they're not here to defend themselves. What I would say is Eunomia have considerable experience of setting up LATCOs for this type of service and with this type of scale of turnover. This isn't a small company. This will be a significantly sized company, with multiple millions of pounds in turnover, and the board structure they've set up is comparable with their experience from elsewhere. That doesn't mean that it's the perfect solution for us. And I think they do, give enough caveats in there around, yours doesn't have to look like this, but, it's an example of scale and what it could look like. The board structure that they give does still ultimately give political input, but it gives it at the shareholder board committee level as opposed to the company board level. That is their suggestion. They've given their reasons why. As an organisation, we wouldn't have to agree with that. It's just a suggestion from a consultancy. I've got to admit, every consultancy report I commission, there will be elements on there that I think are really good, and there will be elements of it that I think, well, actually, I'd do it differently to that. You know, that's par for the course with commissioning a report. But overall, I think they've given us an awful lot of good insight into, you know, how things might work.
Thank you, Zach. And I will now call for a short pause. I was going to give you 10 minutes because everyone spoke so much. I think 5 minutes is sufficient given the time of day. So if we have a 5-minute break, we start again at 5 to 6. And if we can just pick up the final questions on the in-house option, and then we'll move on then to our recommendations. So we'll try and move this at some pace now. Thank you.